Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Gen Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Peter Turkstra, a third generation Hamilton businessman, CEO, and owner of Turkstra Lumber, a family company founded by his Dutch immigrant grandfather in 1953. With 11 branches across southern Ontario and 4 yards plus manufacturing right here in Hamilton, Peter has spent decades building one of our city's most respected local employers. He's lived in Hamilton with his wife Karen since 1996, where they raised their family. Recently, he launched Thrive Hamilton, a completely non-partisan, facts-based platform dedicated to transparency, fiscal accountability, and helping our city finally thrive instead of continuing to spiral. In this long-form conversation, Peter and I go deep into the real challenges facing Hamilton: 23% tax increases, out-of-control city spending, declining services, the housing affordability crisis, development charges, repeated costly failures, and what it will take to turn things around ahead of the October 26, 2026 municipal election. Peter, thank you for joining me. Let's get into it. Good morning, Peter Turkstra. Welcome to the Chin podcast. I very much looking forward to this interview as I prepared a lot for it. And as you know, a lot of Hamiltonians are very frustrated now. Every time I read in the news, in the comment section, there's a lot of negative things towards this current council, including the mayor. Now, a lot of people, Peter, they know you already. The name Turkstra is in Hamilton. I see the vehicles out on the road. And of course, you have been very active in the public media recently, I would say more for the past year or two, but we'll dive deeper, into those things. And then there is a, recent announcement where you launched your new platform. But for those who don't know, Peter is a third generation Hamilton guy. And your grandfather, a Dutch immigrant, started Turkstra Lumber back in 1953. And you lived here with your wife in Hamilton since 1996, raised a family, and now run a company, 11 branches, 4 yards in Hamilton, and a manufacturing facility. What made you say, Peter, enough is enough, and launched Thrive Hamilton at thrivehamilton.ca?
Well, I would say a few things. Fear for the ability for my business to continue to prosper, or at this stage even survive. So that fear is a real motivation. And about a year and a half ago, I was involved in advocacy to discuss what are ridiculous levels of development charges, as well as the HST being charged on almost all large construction projects. And in that process, we reached out to literally every mayor in the 20 municipalities where we work and all the councillors in Hamilton. And as part of that process, I engaged in dialogue with them, and I realized in speaking to the councillors in Hamilton particularly, because this is my hometown now, that the level of knowledge that they had with respect to those issues was very low. And I had really some bizarre discussions with councillors that were so convinced of their dogma, but when I explained the facts, they said, "Oh, I didn't know it worked that way." So I realized that it might be lovely people. And by the way, before I start, there are probably some wonderful employees at the city of Hamilton, just like there are in all businesses. But I realized that at the leadership level that I didn't see what you need to see to feel comfortable that there'll be a better tomorrow. And that is leadership, transparency, and accountability. And then as they came out again with this 3.8% tax for this year, which was dictated by strong mayor powers, and we learned that behind the scenes that they had eaten into the reserves and that there were much bigger tax increases to come unless they cut, and they haven't had demonstrated any ability to manage, I realized that, oh my goodness, my employees who work in Hamilton and are fortunate enough to live here in an apartment or a house are going to wake up to another 10% plus tax increases. So if we keep it just at the basis of residential tax increases before we discuss apartments and affordability, it's horrifying because all of my employees have been on a wage freeze since last year because they understand as a leader that we have to survive this terrible recession. But at the same time, they're going to wake up to $500, $1,000 more property tax, which they pay for in their after-tax dollars. So it's so regressive on working folks that it drives me crazy. And the original thing came from that, the movie, I'm mad as heck and I'm not going to take it anymore. But the truth is that this drip, 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 which I'm guilty of accepting, became kind of an open the flood dam. And you wake up saying 23% higher and no services to show for it. I basically said, I have to get involved.
And Peter, not many Hamiltonians know that because the headlines in February, when it was announced, 3.87%, it looks really good on the current mayor. But as you said, they had to manipulate that number to get to that number. And then last week I interviewed Rob Cooper, and essentially what he said is the next 3 years you're looking at double digits. And, in aggregation, that can be up to, I think he said 30%. So many,
Crazy.
Many in Hamilton don't know that, but it looked very good, 3.87%. But for the past 4 years in total, as you mentioned, 23%, and it's unsustainable. And I always reference that example in January 19th, this year, 2026, a delegate named Michelle Hamilton, a single mom, everyday taxpayer, 2 kids. And what she said is from 2019 to 2022, her property taxes increased $475, and with this current council, $1,700. And homeowners are being priced out of their own homes.
Mm-hmm.
And, but not many people know what really happens in these council meetings and how they derive to make these decisions. So, you also did, I saw an podcast interview with Rick Zamperin, CHCH newsmaker, podcast. He used to be in CHML 900 radio.
I believe so. And then CHCH, I think he's still there.
Yes.
It was interesting. It was my first time doing one, so it was kind of cool.
Oh, it was. Yes, because he interviewed me before. But yes, and in your intro video, you said Hamilton is spiraling despite all its potential. We have lots of potential in Hamilton. And as a longtime resident, as you mentioned, since 1996, and a big employer here in Hamilton, what does that word spiraling really mean to you?
Well, it could be interpreted several ways. If you think of government in terms of what their culture and their mindset should be, they should be servant leadership and working hard for their ratepayers and their taxpayers. And I'm not in any way saying that these issues aren't complex, but it is their job, along with the staff and the senior management at the city, to manage all of these complex areas. I could go into several directions, but, from an employment point of view, we're seeing people aren't comfortable downtown and closing restaurants. From a drug point of view, the situation is worse. At the same time where you're saying, please come buy a condo in Hamilton, you have to witness some things that people shouldn't have to see. Complicated issues, but that reality is that it's much worse right now. Affordability is not good in Hamilton. If you were to live in an Edmonton or an equivalent city out west, you'd have a much higher quality of life. As we discussed, they've eaten through way of property taxes, and we'll discuss more to come if we're not careful, that they've basically robbed their customers, their ratepayers, of disposable income that they could be spending on anything from a trip to saving to paying down their debt to, heaven forbid, shopping at Tim Hortons or Turkstra Lumber or local businesses. So the entire dynamic is negative. Now, what we see is a disconnect where the media will often portray some of the good news stories. And sometimes the good news stories are headlines that don't come to fruition. And I think we're seeing in the States that if you're preaching based on dogma all the time and saying things are great when they're not, it works for a period of time. And the media and the mayor and some of the councillors, I'd say a select group of the councillors, say it's great, it's great, it's great, we're on track, this is our role. But at a certain point, the residents, the customers disconnect. And we're seeing that in the States now, right? We're seeing that even the people that were the most dogma-driven on one side of the electoral side of things are saying, with this Iran war and everything going on and the price of gas going crazy, I can't support it anymore. Well, and that has had a direct impact on us. So if you think of the people who work for me, and I care passionately about their welfare, they're dealing with much higher property taxes at the same time as if they put gas in their car, they don't have the money. And that's why we're seeing record levels of people at food banks, poverty, homelessness. And you're in the apartment business. Some of them would claim that it's not a big issue because apartment owners don't pay property tax increases. Well, that's just false. It's just saying it. And if they say
We
it
pay
enough,
too much in taxes, Peter.
yeah. And so that, so we'll just have to share the load just a little more. And you say, well, eventually it all ends up. We now understand, watching the whole tariff situation, that any development charge, any fee, any water charge, anything that we're doing is ultimately paid for by the tax base. And so the whole spiraling, and I'd say also the level of pride, people are seeing the cracks. And a few years ago, and we'll talk maybe a bit about my dad's foundation and the wonderful resurgence of downtown Hamilton. A few years ago, there was this positive energy and the art situation was improving and we were becoming a more balanced city. And now after this last set of council, I have never felt more discouraged on all fronts. If they were maintaining a budget and we hadn't spent a penny, and then we said we have some issues, we have to go work on them, that would be one thing. But to say our wallet is empty, but by the way, we have $9.8 billion of problems, and just point your fingers left, right, and center at the other levels of government, it's really discouraging.
Yes. So that last sentence you said, I watched on the CHCH where you asked one of the counselor, and the counselor responded that they had over 500 million in surplus of development charges, and and it was how what are they really doing with that money. And so it's really interesting how this council makes decisions on taxpayers' money, Peter.
Right. But I think it's important to point out to your viewers, it's not all the councillors. So in a democracy, there's always going to be a balance. And obviously the strong mayor power would be perhaps very effective when you had a strong leadership mayor who needed to get things done. But the strong mayor power by itself can be a little bit dangerous. And the balance of the folks that we elected the last time around don't seem to be focused on budgeting or fiscal accountability at all. Otherwise, how could they hire 1,000 people and yet not have improved service? We'll talk about it, I'm sure, but where did that money go and how did it go? So it's really, it's just a really discouraging situation.
I think, Peter, the people of Hamilton, they do know, right? When I visit City Hall, and I wouldn't call out any staff or employees that work there, but one said, this city functions on dysfunction, right? With that whole vacant unit tax, and when it comes to even parking, tickets being issued left, right, and center for either yard maintenance bylaw, right, violation, or parking tickets, and then they go to City Hall, they're confused, right? But the bylaw enforcement, advise them, go to City Hall and find out more information. So it seems to be some...
the word dysfunction comes out quite a bit. But again, back to if they were standing up and saying things are great. Well, sometimes in a business, or for instance, right now we are in a recession. We clearly are in a recession. But all three levels of government don't want to call it that. But we are in a recession where people need employment and they need jobs. And so I think the disconnect is there now because they can get up and tell us every day that everything's fine. You only have to go downtown, or you only have to look at your tax bill or look at your upcoming water bill or go on the potential water tax, which will be a disaster if it goes through, and say, hey, why isn't the media speaking about this? But I also think we've had a few chinks in our armor where the flat roof project, at Tiffany was just such a disaster that it got enough information for people to realize, holy crow, we didn't optimize taxpayer dollars. We didn't go and find a Hamilton business in the middle of a recession. I mean, think about it.
Flat roof, Peter, as in the micro shelter?
The micro shelters.
Oh, that was a disaster. Right.
It was, but the part of the bigger disaster, as big a disaster, is that they didn't use their common sense to turn around in a recession and say, can we give jobs locally? I mean, it would be like saying, let's outsource our steel at this time where our steel workers need every pound of steel more than they ever have. It just showed that their thought process was bizarre. Now, as it turns out, there are absolutely many local people who could have done it, but they just didn't check. They just weren't competent enough to stop, drop. And it's important when you have any type of organization or ecosystem to recognize your weaknesses. Strong cities will work on their weaknesses. Strong businesses will work on their weaknesses. They won't sit there and pound their chest and brag and get PR releases. They'll say, how am I better tomorrow? How am I better tomorrow for my employees? How am I better tomorrow for my customers? What kind of services can I bring my customers? What kind of value can I bring my customers? And at City Hall, it seems to be a one-way street of, we'll tell you what you need to hear. But again, there are 5 of them, maybe 6, that have really tried to bring to the forefront the issues with the current practices with everything from accounting to the IT hack. But because they basically get voted down by a group who essentially look like they vote together, combined with the mayor, they haven't been effective. And that's the big challenge, is how do you change that balance to have real democracy? Right now, we do not have democracy at the city of Hamilton.
Yes, and just to repeat for the viewers, Peter, you said 5 or 6 of the councillors are good. Now, the ones that are not good, is it simply ideology? I always say, Peter, common sense is very uncommon these days. And it seems that common sense doesn't prevail. When you know what is the right thing to do, one of the good councillors says, why are we doing all of the things that are the opposite if the goal is economic prosperity? And that's what we are seeing in Hamilton today. Is it simply ideology with the councillors that are not good?
I'm sure they're nice people. When I was going through last year the advocacy, and I ended up having discussions with the majority of the councillors, and not that this is a pure measure, but I'd look up on LinkedIn and say, what have they done prior to this? Are they a doctor? Are they a business person? Do they own apartments? Like, what is their background? And I realized that a lot of the folks who end up in public service end up going through a nonprofit, run for election, get in, and they don't have the track record or background of working for great companies or having an educational diploma or having work experience or life experience. So I think they kind of get elected, then they get there and they look around and say, okay, well, what is kind of like a high school? Who's my gang going to be? And they kind of get recruited to say, oh, you don't have to do all the thinking. This is complicated. So just vote with me. But for sure, there's some dogma stuff going on. The number one palpable thing I feel is, and I've said to them personally, that they are my biggest threat to Turkstra Lumber. And they say, well, that's harsh. And I say, well, you don't care about me. And they say, well, I do care about you. And I said, well, if you cared about me and if you cared about our citizens, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. You wouldn't have voted the way you voted. You clearly don't believe in fiscal discipline. You're punting it forward. You don't believe in effective efficiency of your projects. They're out of control. You don't seem to hold your senior staff accountable. We've made it through the hack. We've been through the project on the flat roof project. We've been through situation after situation, the water tax. And all of this is driven it looks like for one purpose, other than the flat roof one, which is to try and see how much more money we can squeeze out because we're not prepared to manage it. Well, for the rest of us, whether you're an individual living on a salary and now your rent or tax goes up $1,000, you have to make do. You have to make changes. You have to change your spending. And only a few of them really take that to heart. And I don't know why. Perhaps it's culturally that they've just never done it, or perhaps they've never led change. We need a change not only of the practical side, but we need to start with a change of culture. We need a leader who stands up and says, we are in trouble. We want to be great. We can be great. This is what I need from you. And this is what we would all do in business with our staff. And that's why we have extraordinary people. And I believe that Hamilton probably has extraordinary people. I'm sure it does. But who's
Absolutely.
leading them?
And just to be for the viewers to be clear, when Peter said the hacked, meaning that's a 52 million cyber fraud, the cyber attack fraud, right?
Yes.
Right. And then the other one with the flat roof, that's a micro shelter where it was supposed to be 2 million and it went over 5.1 million. And that turned out to be an entire disaster. And I believe it's still being audited right now. And time over, we are seeing these kind of problems in with this current council.
But yes, sorry to interrupt, but as a simple example on that, I call it the flat roof project. But when they went and bought those shelters from China that were purchased on Alibaba from a fictitious company, it's just the whole thing was just so absurd. But then they went to staff to clean these, 40 units for up to 80 people with dogs. And they didn't turn around to their local other organizations and say, can we outsource this? They went and hired people. I almost think that some of the people in council believe that they're a hiring agency. In other words, they'd be more proud to get to 1,500 people instead of 1,000 people. But we cannot sustain growth with a stagnant population in Hamilton of $100 to $150 million a year more increased spending. It just doesn't make any sense. And when you ask them, are you charting it versus population? Are you charting it? Do you have anything? But we don't even have audited financials since 2022. Like we are, it's almost too hard to believe.
Yep, and I believe, Peter, beginning this year, there was an article about strong mayor powers and a lot that left administration. So it seems as though if there are staff that is butting heads with the mayor, Andrew Horwath, I believe it was about 17 or probably more in that administration that left or probably got fired. So it seems like what Rob Cooper described it, Councillor Rob Cooper said, it's like a monarchy. And, with this entire strong mayor powers, that's in the picture.
Yeah, I personally think we should hold them accountable. Whether she moved out 15 people or brought in 15 people, the mayor and the councillors are responsible for the relationship with staff, and they have to deliver. And there's clearly a lack of accountability of some of the senior staff that have managed to make it through with no repercussions to very poor delivery of projects. So if she had hired 20 and had maintained the budget by cutting in other areas, it's clear that they just don't really have any controls at all. And that's the really scary part. I don't judge what they do day to day, but we are, as the customers, allowed to judge the end product that we get. And all that we generally get is, oh, it's the federal government. Oh, it's the provincial government. How about looking in the mirror at their own level of accountability? And some of them, I just think, well, I managed to accomplish what I wanted, whether it's bike lanes or stopping all development or whatever their personal dogma is. But at what point do they actually not care about employment at all? And when I said to them repeatedly, you don't care about me, they say, no, I care about you. And I said, well, you don't get to determine that. My staff are frustrated. We are frustrated. You have killed the economy. You have caused a lack of employment. You have caused a lack of opportunity. And how will Hamilton get out of this hole? Well, we've got some strengths we'll speak about, but it's going to be through thriving, through opportunity, through economic development. And this is the part where I think that some of them really, and I won't swear, but they really don't care.
Oh no, you're absolutely, you nailed it right in the head, Peter. And I'm seeing it from the real estate side, and I can tell you, 10 years ago, all real estate investors would be in this town, and you can hear someone talking about real estate in a Tim Hortons. Someone said last year, all the investors, they're gone. They're not, they're not looking at Hamilton, right? You know, the drugs people, the homeless people, it's ridiculous here in Hamilton. But taking it a step back, Peter, in your CHCH interview, right, with Rick Zamprin, you said the biggest threat to Turkstra Lumber and your team right now is the way the city of Hamilton is being run. And you touched on some of it already, especially the taxes up nearly 23%. Can you explain what that really looks like for your business, your employees, and the builders you serve? Like some of the things you're hearing from your employees and the builders you serve.
Well, the 23% property tax is really more for our employees and for ourselves. And every dollar that somebody takes from us is less money for us to do other things with. From the builders, obviously the development charges had gone through the roof, and it got to the point between the HST and the development charges that they just couldn't sell a home anymore. The shine was off of COVID, and they needed reform, and some of it is coming in right now. But it. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there a little bit. What were you asking again?
Yep. Like, what are some of the things you're hearing from your employees? And, well, if
yeah,
you hear anything from
the
builders you serve. Yeah.
the employees are basically just get told how they should live, and when they take their tax money away, it goes. For the builders, I have some builders who said 5 years ago, never Hamilton again, just because of the lack of efficiency and the turnaround and the bureaucracy. But then last year, even for those who had land and it had an ability to sell, the ever rising cost of development charges combined with the HST made it so that they couldn't survive anymore. So you take that and then you add to that a culture of being very difficult with building of any kind, or trying to get a project through and getting blocked, and even the city suing builders, and then they force the builders to go to tribunals. And when they go to the tribunals, they normally win because the city isn't in the right. There's this culture of no, and it's a culture of pushing people away. Now, I have 11 branches and we serve about 20 communities. So you only have to drive down towards Brantford to see what it looks like when you get positive momentum. And I use the example of chocolate factories, but that's a newer one. It started years ago with NRAC, who would have built in Hamilton, but were turned down by a developer who stabbed him in the back at the last minute and went down the highway on the corridor. So we have a perception, and we all have heard at the federal level of liquidity leaving Canada over the last 10 years, and how with Carney, he has a chance of maybe bringing some of it back, saying we're now open for business. Open for business is an overused word. Well, Hamilton's, the way it's perceived outside is not open for business. And so if you're not open for business and you're surrounded by other areas that are performing better, that's what you're going to do. I'd also say that if you're selling units or trying to build rentals and your taxes go up, then that makes it harder to maintain affordability. So if you are selling homes, and let's say we end up where the taxes on a townhouse end up at $10,000 versus $7,000 because you've lost control once again of your budget, well, then for the person who's trying to sell a condo in 2 years, or build an apartment, or build on the mountain, or build in Bimbrook, I could use any example. When people buy those units, they have to build that in. So they basically played Robin Hood without asking the end consumer. They basically said, the ends justify the means, and never mind that we didn't control our budgets, you're just going to pay. And so I would ask you, what would the world say, or what would Canadians say if we made HST 20%? We'd be on it. The media would be on it. We'd be outraged, and we would recognize that would kill our economy. But why is it okay to steal $1,000 over a 4-year period probably at a minimum from your ratepayers on an annual basis for 4 years? That means that they have less money to spend, and that trickle down effect in the economy is palpable. We a balanced society needs arts, music, entertainment. This new Live Nation building is proving to be wonderful, with hotels full, restaurants vibrant, all the things you think you'd want in a great city. Well, we had some councillors that were against it. Like, you just want to say, like, what are you thinking? So the term I have is we're kind of perceived as the land of no. And that's exactly what you wouldn't want to be known as.
No, you're absolutely right, Peter. This is all the economic drivers, and we have all the good things here in Hamilton, but some in council makes it challenging, or at least their perception. They're just not really supporting that direction, and that just we have years of you can say the past 8 years with the past two terms of our council, where Hamilton could have been much more prosperous, and it didn't go in that direction. And so I absolutely agree with everything that you just said. You also warned the construction industry is at a tipping point.
Yep.
And what are you seeing day to day with the builders? Now, there was an article, Peter, a few days ago with Danny Gabriel from Mars Homes, and she chairs on the Western Home Builder Association, and she delegated at City Council about, I believe they were proposing 4% increase, or maybe one of the councillor, raised that question about 4% increase in the development charge. And her response, she gave them a very good education on how the development business works, and said, their sort of thinking is really counter to what provincial government mandates, and to reduce or cut these development charges to stimulate the business, the development, or the housing business. What are your thoughts on that? What are you seeing from the builders or your trades, with respect to pause projects, layoffs, or even something even tougher?
Well,
Because it does hurt. It does hurt them,
yeah.
Peter.
Yeah.
When the condo
Last year
market is
was
down, there's no jobs.
there are many unemployed trades, and I've
Yeah.
been, screaming at the top of my lungs for a year and a half. And fortunately, they have put together and indexed the HST, so that will be really help with affordability. So that is in place for the next year at the federal and provincial level. At the same time, Prime Minister Carney came out and said he would make funds available for municipalities to reduce their development charges by up to $50,000. So in Ontario. So some municipalities are already on top of it and have taken their DCs down to zero to stimulate construction, knowing it is a wonderful multiplier effect from, by the way, all the gas in their trucks to them surviving, to them having income. And then I was just shocked to hear that Hamilton was thinking of putting through a 4% increase. Now, that's just staff making a recommendation. I lost my mind. I was like, wait a sec. You want people to build houses so that we can maintain affordability. Well, I think you'd know in real estate, if you want prices to go up, you constrict availability. So here we are in Canada with all this land, but we put all these rules and red tape in place to restrict availability, which has driven up the cost of land, which is driving up the cost of a house. And the same thing will be true for apartments and condos and any type of construction. But they don't see it as a multiplier effect. They see themselves as Robin Hood. So when I would say to them, it's literally under 20,000 in Calgary, but it's 120,000 in Hamilton. And this is way before developing the land. So all the things you hear about, like parkland dedication and the 20-year process of getting your land. This is just, I want to put a shovel in the ground, and how much are you going to take from me? Well, they're taking a huge amount, and then they come out with another 4%. And I said, well, if I was the mayor, I'd be all over to say to your staff, your instructions are to go get this money in whatever way it takes so that I can reduce my development charges. And then that way I'll get the flow going. So last year when I was calling these councillors, I said, you do realize that the goose, which was this $100,000 development charge per unit, is no longer laying eggs, because you took it to the point where houses weren't affordable. So your revenues are now going to be off 70 to 80%. So you've caused a problem, and now you want to point your fingers at other people rather than saying, how did we get here? And every time I ask the question, do you know how we got here? They say, well, staff's recommendations were. Well, as a leader, I have an executive team, and my executive team comes and they generally execute at the highest level. but the executive team themselves have to work within their means. If I had a strategy at Turkstra Lumber and my sales dropped by 70% and it was going to affect my viability, by the way, the difference is I can borrow. Thankfully, they can't. But so I can make it through a rough patch, but thankfully they can't, or we'd be in big trouble. I would change my ways. But they literally were oblivious. They were actually hiring people in the construction departments at a time where townhouses and first single homes were off 70%. Now, if we come back to employment, what is it worth it to the city when somebody takes an old building and revitalizes it, like the Copley Center across or whatever? You say those are providing boots on the ground, well-paid jobs, downtown, revitalizing the city, providing employment, and providing a wonderful multiplier effect. And that's what we need. We need more of that. Well, we had it. And then what did they do? They got greedy. So when they saw that post-COVID, as it was running up, they increased and increased and increased and increased to that degree. And now that we've resolved the HST thing, at least for a period of time, which is showing some promise, but it's almost a little too late because they waited a long time. But I think it will have a positive impact. I'm not seeing our city jump all over that they could reduce development charges by 40 to 50,000, which, by the way, would go right into the pockets of these new homeowners who might move to Hamilton from Milton or Toronto. So they're actually killing the inflow of people. And for every one of those people who buy a townhouse, then they get $7,000 minimum property tax into perpetuity. They just don't do math. I mean, the conclusion I can come to is that either staff are not telling them the full truth, or as executives, they don't know what questions to ask of staff to get the data they need to be informed. And I'm sorry that sounds critical, but the evidence is that they caused a problem, they killed the industry, and now they're pointing fingers. And that's just about as sad as the problem.
Well, Peter, who is directing the staff to go do the research and then come back and report? It's the certain councillors, with some of these city matters, and it's a bit of an insight when it comes to some of the rental housing bylaws. Initially for the rental licensing, right? Initially, staff did not recommend to go forward with it, and then somehow it was changed last minute, and then they went forward, for another 2 years, and then to be reviewed, and then potentially for it to be citywide. And what that means is now it's more costly for all rental housing providers. But some of these bylaws, some would say it's redundant because we have a property standards bylaw to ensure these rental apartments are healthy and safe. Yeah. Now, yes, last year you did send open letters and videos, Peter, to the mayor again, because it seems as no one was really trying to take in any action municipally, right? As you kept saying, calling out the issues and etc. And I think you did send letters to provincial and probably even federal government urging to cut these development charges and bureaucracy. And so walk us through that whole, like, the feedback that you got, what you pushed to create, and what pushed you to create a Thrive Hamilton today in April 2026, which is a completely non-partisan and facts-based platform. So from last year, you being very, very strong advocate, and what led to launching Thrive Hamilton April this year?
Well, as I mentioned, first of all, Thrive Hamilton is not about development charges. Thrive Hamilton is about everything that's underneath the budget, right? If you could go into silos for LRT, two-way streets, whatever you decide to do. But Thrive Hamilton is about accountability at the highest level. And as I mentioned last year through my advocacy, I ended up speaking to many councillors and the mayor, and many mayors in other communities as well, and MPs and MPPs, because I wrote them all, and Prime Minister, and Doug Ford, and Rob Flack, and all of them, because this is really a 3-tier problem that we had on the development charge size. Absolutely. My current concern now, and why I decided to start Thrive, was, as I mentioned, not believing that the councillors that we elected last time have the skills. and I'll say again, I'm guilty of that too. I haven't paid enough attention to municipal politics. But when you wake up to 23% more and you wake up to, well, is my business going to be viable? Because if this continues, we're going to destroy the economy, jobs, employment. Then I realized that I needed to have a platform to kind of really change the dynamic. And this is the tricky part. I'm not advocating any mayoral candidate or any of the councillors. As a matter of fact, I think I only know or have only met one of them ever. I grew up in Montreal. My dad was a professor before he came into the business. I worked for IBM for many years before coming. I lived in Greensville. I know two because I met Ted McMeekin many years ago. So I don't know them, but I realize that there's this apathy that we don't get educated. And then what ends up happening is we end up voting on name recognition. And we've had this in Hamilton for 20 years. You just vote for a guy who was a hairdresser and we all knew his name, and never mind whether he was good or not. And by the way, I don't know him, so he might have been fantastic. But I said, I really need to change a culture here ourselves of paying more attention. And that's why I decided to create the platform. It was suggested to me by a good friend, and I went, oh, I hadn't thought of that. And then I went online, and I'd never used GoDaddy, and I went and I got the name Thrive Hamilton because that was suggested by another friend. And then I went and opened an Instagram account. I have some very wonderful support from a young lady who's helping me learn all these Instagrammy stuff and tagging and posting and mentioning and collaborating and all that. And then and it really came from people saying that they thought that I could make a difference. So the question is, well, why can I make a difference when others haven't? And one of the dynamics which is really scary to me is that councillors over time and the city have proven to have an anti-business slant. They love to put down developers. They love to put down apartment owners. They always take the side of the little person. But, that's their rhetoric. They're always defending somebody from evil. Well, I'm in an almost 75-year-old business. Several hundred of my employees live in the Hamilton area. My father and my mother, rest in peace, founded Insight Foundation for the Arts decades ago, which still exists today, and as philanthropists and still put in money every year to the music and the arts because they believed in it. And my wife and I have two foundations, so we're not an obvious piñata, right? We're philanthropists. I care about downtown. I think that between our two foundations, we support 37 charities or something like that in Hamilton. But the need is so great. And at the same time, they're choking my business. So if you choke my business where you lose money, well, A, I may not be in business, so you're going to lose the jobs. But B, at a minimum, it's going to impact my ability to be a philanthropist and to support downtown. And it's the same argument that I would have with council. If they become more efficient and they control their budget, they will actually have the resources to work on the areas that need help. But if you're dysfunctional in almost every category, then you're not going to have the resources to work in that area. And that's why Thrive is consciously not getting into all the drop buckets. I'm sure it'll come out of the dialogue when we ask them questions. But the core thing is it's their job to manage the totality of it all. No different than you and your business and me and my business and the guy who runs Stelco. They have to deal with the real world. And so that's where it kind of came from. And then when I started it, literally from my living room, and in a day posted a video on LinkedIn and had 100 people watching, I was like, whoa.
A few hundred pizza.
Oh no, it's going up 100 a day. Yeah. And the people are reaching out to me by private message, by LinkedIn. How do we help? How do we give you money? Don't need money, by the way, because I'm doing this myself. But literally, we need this. How can we support you? And my answer is just simply ask people to engage in the Instagram and the Facebook page, because that's where the action's going to be. But there's this clear undertone of helplessness. And if I can provide a platform, because the traditional media doesn't really do it as well anymore because of cutbacks, then maybe people will get the truth. And if they get the truth, they'll be more informed. And if they get more informed, they might get upset. But the most important thing is they go to the polls and elect differently next time.
Yep. And just to be clear, Thrive Hamilton is deliberately not about you running for office, right? You're not a politician guy. You're probably a policy guy or just wants or really cares about Hamilton, wants to see it thrive. And you did touch on, of course, why now? Because we are months away from the municipal election. Now, going back, you touched, Peter, on, and I absolutely, I can feel it, right? You're in the right direction and, doing the right thing, Peter. That's why so much, is behind you and supporting you as well. And your platform, Thrive Hamilton, points out residential taxes went up 23% since 2022 election. So in the past 4 years, even after the city used reserves to soften the blow in election years this year. And going back, this is sort of a repetitive question, what it really means for typical homeowners, renters, or small business owner trying to make ends meet. So if a question is slightly repeated, Peter, is just to capture this one, clip. Because, as you mentioned, less discretionary spending, businesses earn less, and it has that whole downward spiral effect, right? Negatively impacting all these different buckets as you mentioned. But what did not just from the employer perspective, but an actual homeowner or business owner, to touch on those, how does it negatively impact you as well?
Well, at the limit, it affects your viability. And so the example I've used is, if you are I don't know, you're a bagel store and somebody increases your taxes by $1,000, whether it's a water tax, a tax is a tax is a tax. They take $1,000 more out of your pocket. There's this notion that all businesses can absorb anything we give them and we'll just pass it on to our customers. Well, there's competition out there. So the viability, if you're a bagel owner and somebody charges you $1,000 extra versus the prior year, how many extra bagels based on their profit margin do you think that they would have to sell just to cover that one expense? And if that one expense went up at the same time as the cost of deliveries of their components that go into their bagels went up because of fuel or the war or whatever, these calamities that happen together could affect your ability to stay in business or not. And for everyone that doesn't succeed, at a minimum, the owner makes less income, which is less taxes for everybody. But they have employees, and those employees either get laid off, work share, or however you define it. And it just goes all the way down. The other side of it is lack of confidence. You want a society where people think that they can excel, that they can invest in it, that they can open a second location, that they can expand, that they can create the positive multiplier effect. Well, if you don't have certainty, and we're seeing this in the States now, right now, and you don't know what your future costs are going to look like, and you fear that they're going to go the wrong way, you're going to factor that in and make decisions accordingly. So in your world, maybe I won't take that unit and make it into a duplex. I won't build my ADU. I won't build my 4-story building and add to the inventory of much needed housing. You're going to take a pause. You're going to put your foot on the brake and say, I don't have the confidence. And that's why I think that being on the upside of success is so contagious, right? But you can't just stand up and say we're great when you're not. That's disingenuous. You have to say, we have issues. We're going to address them. I'll give you a report card every 3 months. This is how we're progressing. And there are going to be some hiccups along the way, but that's what leadership looks like. Leadership is acknowledging you have issues, not pretending that everything's fine. And that affects everything from whether the business is viable to whether they expand. And if they close, well, we've seen evidence of that. And you only have to look downtown at a pretty big mall and empty signs to realize that right now we have that issue already, and we have for the last few years, and getting worse.
Oh no, you're absolutely right, Peter. If you like, say for instance in New York City with the Mayor Mamdani, who calls himself a democratic socialist, and it's all about taxing the rich and tax on top of tax on top of tax. It's not going to be good for a city, and especially for the business people as well. It's not going to be good at all.
Yeah, but when I was my first year of university, I was lucky enough to live in Brooklyn for a year, and we're often compared to Brooklyn in terms of we have that incredible potential. Well, my mother and father passed away, and their wish was to have their ashes at the base of the Brooklyn Bridge. Long story. My dad was an engineer, and he wanted to be there because he'd lived in New York for many years. And so my sister and I went to New York to spread the ashes, and we could not believe what Brooklyn looked like versus
Is it
20 years.
good
It could,
today
oh,
or no?
unbelievable,
Oh,
unbelievable investment.
wow.
The rundown areas were shiny and new. There were fancy hotels going in. All the corners had eateries on them. And, as an example, we have these wonderful food culture in Hamilton that's just a gift, right? But they have that. And so I choose to believe that with proper policy and decision making, because of our obvious things, we have water, we have the lake, we have all
Oh,
this stuff that
everything
people would
here,
kill for.
Peter.
We're not the middle of northern Ontario. Uh, we have it, and we've squandered it. We've just literally squandered it, and that's the part that's a shame.
Yeah, we definitely have to resolve the drugs issue and the
Yeah,
homelessness. It's been too long for a number of years. And as you mentioned, when you have big projects like TD Coliseum that opened, this was, I believe, November last year, where Paul McCarthy was the first show,
yeah,
and they had to put a black kind of top to cover the Salvation Army with the homeless people, right in front there. It's and they're still there, but currently thinking to relocate them to Gage Avenue North. But
yeah,
time and time we continue to see these things in the city. And yes, as you mentioned, Peter. So I believe roughly last year had about 8,500 employees in the city of Hamilton. Today, roughly about 9,500 people employed. Do we really need all these additional employees, and what are they really doing? Because yet, and this, and even with all of this stuff, many residents say the potholes in the roads are worse, transit, is slower, and basic services are slipping. How you really explain that disconnect? We have more staff, we are spending more money. Where are we getting that return on that money that we are spending? Where's the disconnect with the money spending and the services, Peter?
and that is going. I hope that will be the power of Thrive. So you have to remember, I'm on the outside. You're on the outside. So our ability to get transparent access to the truth is limited. I could go do delegations and, stand up there and wax philosophical, but the people who can get access to that are the elected officials. And by the way, I wrote to every single elected official right now and invited them to join the Thrive group and invited them to participate. And I'm going to be asking questions of all of the ones that are incumbent and the people that are running to get to their platform, what their opinions are. So I'm really hopeful that because they have inside access, and you mentioned Rob Cooper and there are others that are fiscally minded, I'm going to be asking them questions like, do you have a breakdown of the 1,000 new employees and what departments they were in? And where were they? Because I can't get easy access to that, but they can. One thing's for sure, uh, I haven't added any people in Turkstra Lumber because we're in the middle of a recession. I'm just trying to protect jobs for the employees I have, even running a loss. But we don't know where they hire the 1,000 people or whether it made sense. We know that some of them are in the department for the vacant tax units. They just hire and hire and hire. But I'm hoping that the counselors will come out with that fact-based data, because otherwise, I would say I don't think that many people know that we've hired 1,000 people. They don't know why we went up 23%. And I can't tell you with full certainty why either. Was it subsidized housing? Was it new developments? Did we grant money? All of this, I'm hoping, will come out of the debate between those who are in council right now, who are seeking re-election, and the mayor, and those who are going to seek to be the next candidates. And I really believe in a methodology called Gestalt. People will make up their own minds. I'm not trying to guide the discussion. I just want to ask the questions and get the topics out there. And I think that reasonable people will look at the answers and make their own mind up. And in some cases, I expect some people to not participate at all. In the last few years, I've noticed at both the municipal, federal, and provincial level, that sometimes the best strategy when you don't like your track record is to say nothing at all and to not engage. Because when you engage, somebody who's efficient on the other side will undress you for not really having a plan. So if you never had a plan, why go on your podcast, Daniel, and answer tough questions? You're better off to say, people know my name and I hope I win at the election, and I'll post smile cookie videos and I'll talk about my dogma stuff to my base. This is not, I'm not just picking on the municipal folks here. I'm sure it's in all the municipalities, but we're seeing it federally and provincially. You've had, people say, do not go to debates. You say, well, aren't debates a great expectation of democracy? And we would say in the States, we'd reflect and say, well, that's crappy. You should speak it out, challenge each other. And we're moving away from that. So
No,
I'm really hoping that will come out of this.
No, Peter, for the viewers of this this interview, what you are saying is exactly what the real picture in reality, what is happening in Hamilton. If the councillors who and the not so good councillors, right? Let me be more specific. Yes, recently they care more about the public image, smile cookies, etc., whatever, all those things you said. But we have so many big problems in Hamilton to be cleaned up. And, and of course, being election year, October, right, is municipal election, they are more focused on what they can do to get those votes, or indirectly, quote unquote, buy those votes. It's there's a lot of work to be done in Hamilton. Now, you highlighted some of the issues, and you also mentioned since 2022, we haven't had audited financial statements. So how would we know, all of these, there's no transparency in our finances in the city. In November 2024, City Housing Hamilton did their full audit and disclose and released VAT. But City of Hamilton, right, haven't even, done a full audit. And I asked the same question to Rob Cooper last week. And and that's one of the things that he mentioned in his first 100 days, if he does become mayor of Hamilton, that that's one thing he will work on. And then, as well as it was capped the taxes is another thing which he mentioned. And there was, I believe, the vacant unit tax. He says that's gonna go. That did not make any sense, because the whole, in the beginning, the discussions around council was for it to, of course, the figures, how much it'll cost, how much revenues it can, and of course to address the homelessness crisis.
Yeah.
But from since a few years ago till today, homelessness quadrupled. So it didn't really solve the homelessness crisis, but it cost taxpayers money, 4 million, 5 million. And then they voted to continue on with it another year. And like you said, every year they have to declare. This year they extended it till the end of this month. 25% still haven't declared. And it's, when around this time, when I go to City Hall, or even last year, and witnessed they come with their property vacant unit tax bill that they have to pay, and it's and these are just everyday working people, that have to face this because they just didn't know, or they didn't declare when they had to. But recently, there was Kelly Ucharek, who announced her candidacy for Ward 2, where the current councillor is Cameron Crutch. Beginning this year, she had a petition titled "Millions Lost at City Hall," and list all the specific costly failures, like the micro shelter, which you call the flat roof, going over 300% over budget, which is 5.1 million over budget. There is the HSR bus ban, which was ballooning by tens of million, precisely over 100 million, right, over cost overruns. and 52 million cyber fraud, right? Many everyday Hamiltonians have commented things like, we are tired of our hard-earned tax dollars being wasted, or enough is enough. We need real oversight. What's your take on these repeated expensive mistakes, Peter? And these are comments I
Well,
read in online on the news, Reddit forums, where you can comment, and it's just not good things what they say about the city.
yeah. I was sent a petition last week. That petition, I actually signed it, by the way. I've never met her, by the way, but I read the frustration
Yeah,
of the people in that
yeah.
area,
I
or
think
I
it
would
was
say
over a
all through
thousand
Hamilton.
people are signed.
Yeah. So, again, I have to be careful. I'm sure we have some wonderful employees at the city of Hamilton, and the word dysfunction is more of a cultural word that you'd use in terms of not getting along and not cooperating. But there has to be accountability. So if you have these projects, whether it be the hack or not getting the insurance on the hack because you didn't put in two-part authentication, which it turns out sounds like it's another issue on top of the hack, and you don't have that accountability in your staff, and you don't, I mean, I have employees that have at times not made the cut, and it's the most painful thing, but you have to say, you're not keeping up. I need better. And you try and move them internally sometimes, but if you've hired somebody specifically at a senior level who can't do the job, they have to go. So I actually feel that there are probably a lot of other folks along the path. There was a recent study, however, that indicated that Hamilton had far more supervisors than, for instance, Ottawa per capita. So this is maybe another function of, we all get along and we all give each other raises. So, and this is part of our frustration at Turkstra Lumber. We're on a wage freeze, and they're not. And I'll get in real trouble for this, but I almost feel like if you've seen the Hunger Games, they're the people that had the colored hair and lived the rich life. Well, they sent the rest to slaughter in the Hunger Games in that movie. And I wonder, is this it? Their world is that they live in impunity. They live as if they're just going to get reelected and keep their jobs and give themselves raises and give their staff raises, while their customers are left to fend with the result of their incompetence. And I'll use the word incompetence. You can't have that many projects fail by any measure without looking at them and saying, well, who is in charge? And again, council also need to be, they're a governance board. It's not their job to step in and do that job and get those financial statements. It's their job, as is mine as the owner of Turkstra, to go to my executive team and ask them for the information and ask them to do the work and ask them to make the recommendations. So clearly that normal governance you'd see between a board and a company is just not in place. And I believe it's partly cultural, but it's obvious that we have a skill set issue in terms of the people that we've elected and some of the senior officials in Hamilton.
So essentially, Peter, the city really has to think, business minded, very common sense, right? When it comes to fiscal management, right? Over the taxpayers' dollars as they make decisions on it, better accountability, transparency, budgeting. But it seems as though they can make any decisions in any direction, and they don't lose customers because we still have to live. You can't pick up your house and go, and you're still here in Hamilton.
I mean, it's. I'll give you a simple example. The world is back to work. People at Turkstra Lumber in our industry never did go off for COVID. We had to work in horrifying conditions
Wow.
because we were declared an essential service. And
Correct.
last year when I was speaking to the mayor, I explained to her that's back when they were doing 1 day a week in the office. And I explained to her that people were bringing in blueprints and being met by a security guard who would say, I'll put that on the person's desk when they come in next week. And I explained that they were not staggering their days, even though it was 1 day a week, that the staff were not staggering their days. Imagine if Turkstra Lumber said, I've just decided to close randomly and you won't know if I'm open for business, or a Tim Hortons or anybody. And she didn't know. She did not know that they were not staggering their days. Now, her reaction was to say, well, I'll check into that because that doesn't seem reasonable. Well, that shows you there's a lack of listening because if I told her that, it's because I was advocating that this is not working for us, your customer. I need to be there for uh, my customers at their beck and call. I don't get to determine exactly what happens. And so there's just this disconnect that's there. And I think it comes back to skill set.
Absolutely. So let's shift back to housing affordability and development charges, right?
Yeah.
Some questions might be repetitive, but just to capture this segment, as as someone whose whole business depends on building and renovating, you've called development charges a hidden tax grab that adds tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars per new home. How is that directly driving up rents and keeping young families from buying or renting in Hamilton? Because many, like viewers out there, whether they're the homeowners, or ratepayers or taxpayers, they don't really fully understand the the effects of what developers face, and in turn how it affects rent, housing prices, families, etc., buyers,
Well,
renters.
I could speak directly to the townhouse, singles, and condo market, which is that every
Sure.
dollar that a city or a province or a federal puts on is paid for by the end consumer, period. The prices will go up and down in the market depending on how hot it was, like COVID, or how slow it was last year. But even last year, when it was really slow, people didn't have the confidence to want to step forward. So it takes a combination of being able to build something affordably, whether it's a car or a house or whatever, and then the confidence of people in their employment and their jobs. And last year, of course, we saw that there was insecurity because of the tariffs, and there were absolutely some job losses combined with you couldn't build a condo and sell it. I mean, until this recent reform, if you had $100,000 on a townhouse in Bimbrook and then HST, by the way, on top of that, and then the actual impact of the HST, most people didn't realize they were paying HST on a home. They just said, my house is 700,000, but it was buried in there. But either way, it worked as egregious as it was when interest rates are at 1.7%, because the real calculation is what is my mortgage amount plus what is my property tax amount plus what is my insurance amount. That's kind of you add those three things up for the new home segment. And I'll get to the apartments in a minute. And so when you added those up, you have rising property taxes. So that means if they pay an extra $800, well, that makes it less affordable. That's just an obvious. But you have these hidden taxes. And then when the interest rate spiked from 1.7% quickly to 7% for a period of time, all of a sudden your $2,800 mortgage became $4,000 and you just couldn't buy the house. And it's almost that simple. And then they'd say, well, if the interest rate stayed at 1.7, we wouldn't have had this problem. And I go, yes, but it's a poor policy decision. It's a really poor policy decision. And all three levels of government were benefiting on it. And then it collapsed. Like it literally collapsed. And now it's going to come back and it'll take some time. And as it was collapsing, the federal and provincial governments were not meeting their targets. So they're the ones who set out targets based on immigration and what they think they need. And we were falling behind. And that's partly what really spiked how home prices went crazy during COVID, because it was busy and we weren't building enough houses because of all the bureaucracy and the rest. On the apartment side, well, you'd know better than me, but some councillors believe that people that are renting don't have any impact from this because it's the landlords that pay the taxes. So heaven forbid you were a landlord with, I don't know, 100 people in your apartment and you get this big tax increase. You're just not going to pass it on. Well, the truth is it lags, but all costs are eventually paid for and borne by the consumer. And we know this from the U.S. and taxes. We don't need to argue it anymore, but they just don't understand it or they don't want to speak about it. And so as somebody who choose to build an apartment or not, I'm sure that you would look at it and say, well, I can only build the apartment if I can rent it. So last year we had one of the councillors in particular that said, with some development charge reform, I hope the developers do their jobs. And I wanted to scream, you moron. You caused this problem. Your policy caused the problem that a builder can't sell a house, so he can't build the house. So the thousands of people hours that would go in from high skilled trade jobs can't happen. And then you have the audacity to turn around. Let me ask you the question. Why are you charging $110,000 development charge on a home? To which the answer is, well, I'm told we need it. Well, by who? Staff. Well, did you challenge it? Right. And I mentioned in the other podcast, I had one counselor say to me, I need more than a $500 million surplus in development charges because I have a $9.8 billion issue with infrastructure as a whole. So I held my hands up and I said, are you suggesting that that should be on the back of only new home buyers on the mountain or wherever? And then, and she said, but I have pipes bursting in my neighborhood from 1870. So I said, well, with respect, counselor, one thing I know is that if that home is from 1870, a form of Hamilton City has been charging them taxes since 1870. Where is the reserve for that? And where did that money go? You've charged them taxes since 1870, and now you're saying you have an infrastructure deficit and you want new home buyers to bear the brunt? Do you understand that that doesn't work? And the answer I got was kind of a vague response. Like, oh, that's interesting.
Peter, this is great because viewers, they do not know. Some people, they just read whatever it's on the newspaper, Hamilton Spectator and etc. Sometimes they would cover some stories where, for instance, the mayor with her house in central Hamilton here with the ex-husband, and that is not looking good on the mayor. I respect the mayor, but it's not looking good on the mayor. And, and then there's some other, newspapers, the Bay Observer, the Public Record, they share more details. But some people, they just read whatever is on their phone, on Reddit forums, etc. And that's all they know. They don't hear these, type of conversations, Peter. So very much appreciate you sharing that. And so you did cover some of the other things with respect to housing or unaffordability. But if a new council in 2026, Peter, actually froze or cut those development fees like you've been urging, or completely waive it entirely, like city of Vaughan, how quickly could we see more housing starts, more jobs, and real relief on prices for families? Is it something, of course it's good if they do it, but how long until will we see those positive effects, would you say? Quick ask from me, Daniel Chin. If you are enjoying the Chin podcast, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. Our mission is simple: to inform, inspire, and advance economic prosperity right here in Hamilton through honest conversations about business, policy, and real estate. Subscribing helps us grow, bring on better guests, and deliver even stronger episodes for you. Thank you, and let's build this together.
Well, we're starting to see some positive effects from the HST reform before this new reform, but I still think there's a danger of at least a year or more lag. And this is one of the reasons why I've been making this message urgently. I mean, when I contacted counselors last year and said, have you checked your development charge revenues are off probably 80 to 90%. So you're not actually giving anything back because you're not getting the money anyways. You've killed the goose. They just didn't even understand that. And they thought I was being dramatic. And I'm like, my staff are on work share in our truss manufacturing plants. The builders are pained. And because, again, of this slant of anti-business, they don't understand that our staff are everything to us. And I had builders who were actually doing a block just to try and give some employment to their trades. It was crippling to all of us to see this lack of confidence. We're all part of the same ecosystem. At the same time, by the way, when these jobs weren't being held, people have been leaving the industry. Well, what do we need? A strong workforce of strong people. So it's going to take a lag. I'm hopeful that the 13%, because it has a time limit, may start to kick in by this fall. But because the affordability was so poor because of these high DC charges, and by the way, the builders aren't getting those back on the older ones, they have houses that they haven't sold for 2 years. So there will just be a lag while they get through their inventory and then they kick it in. Renovation, I think, will be more a function of consumer confidence and positivity. So if we get that Brooklyn vibe, let's go again. Arts and all the thriving things in Hamilton, that would kick in. Our retail side last year was relatively stable, which was good for us. Maybe a positive Canada thing, or maybe we're just that good. It's awesome, but it was steady last year. And but I fear now that this year our average transaction is way down because I think a combination of needing to pay your gas bills along with these other type of tax increases, people just don't have the revenue. So I always use the word balance. It's not about Mattamy Homes putting in 5,000 houses. That's not the fix. The fix is all the middle people like yourselves who are going to choose whether or not you're going to start that 4-unit apartment. And if the policy still says that it works, but the 4th unit still has a big DC, so now it doesn't work and you can't build it, we won't end up with that inventory. It seems like they don't speak to their constituents. When I was speaking to whether it was Rob Flack, who was great, by the way, or the counselors, I'd say they'd ask me these questions almost naively, and I'd say, I'm not the builder. I'm here to tell you, you should get a focus group together of the apartment people. And I'm hearing from them that you're this close because you had some good things that you did, some HST relief or whatever. But I don't do
Bill
that.
60.
So I don't know. But then they're telling me that they can't proceed because of you're this close, but if you did the following, it would make the big difference. And then I encourage them to have that dialogue. And it's almost like they're afraid to engage with you, or they're afraid to engage with the builders. And some of them, I think, are afraid to engage with the industry for fear that people will think, oh, you're in the builder's pocket. This is just rhetoric that we've passed over and over and over again. And it's really not damaging. I don't take offense when I hear that they're speaking to the CEO of Stelco to try and save the jobs at Stelco, or that they're going to work with somebody to put in a new plant for hundreds of millions federally. I don't take offense to that. Why is it that when there's a discussion with the construction industry, which is one of the largest employers of any industry, that there's a need for this rhetoric? Listen, and I'll use the word again, thrive together. If more units,
That's your slogan right there, Peter. Thrive together.
I know, but it's overused. But
Yep.
we always seem like we're this close. And in business, we have demonstrated you can turn a business around. You can turn cultures around. Many, many examples of that. And you don't want to end up like some of our crown corporations where it gets to the point where you almost can't turn them around. And this is the dilemma. And I come back again that there are many things that sit under the budget. So I'm not criticizing every one of them, but it's their job to do and manage that business the same way it's my job to make sure that Turkstra Lumber satisfies our customers. It's just that simple.
It starts at the top, Peter. The leadership, it's all about the leadership at the top. And for the past, I would probably say the past 6 to 8 years, Hamilton, more and more Hamiltonians, they are more frustrated. Business people, for instance, Ancasa Jewelers, got robbed 2 times, right? They open a second location. And when they get robbed so many times, their insurance goes up. In Mapleview Mall in Burlington, Michael Hill's jewelry store got robbed, I think 3 or 4 times already. And it's only May month. The same store got robbed, right? And then you have restaurants where the demand, on a busy Friday, 50% empty, right? So that, causes some restaurants who they don't have the cash flow to stay alive, and then results in closures, right? And even for those who do not know, Lime Ridge Mall, owned by Cadillac Fairview, they sold the mall. It's a new owner who owns Lime Ridge Mall in Hamilton. So there's in beginning this year, you would read headlines saying retail apocalypse, right? You have Eddie Bauer close all their locations. right? I think 24 locations in Canada, and and businesses suffer as a result of bad policy. We're seeing it in Hamilton, but my biggest thing is the drugs. You have to solve the drugs problem. After reading the book Willful Blindness from Sam Cooper, where he revealed the Vancouver model, where the drugs are coming from China to Vancouver and then dispersed throughout North America. So what that causes is now you have over 7,000 homeless people in California. So they have it much bigger. And for us, it seems like it's not reducing. It's growing. It's more than 2,000 homeless people. And to see the condition, the state of how the city of Hamilton is, you go City Hall. Now they have guard securities guarding because there's Wesley and all these, things happening with homeless people. And it's just throughout the city. And I asked the same question to Rob Cooper, and he's very, very big on it. He said when he becomes mayor, right? Guns, gangs, drugs, you're not going to see that 4 years from now. But that's what he said. Right?
Yeah, I'm it's clear to me because people are reaching out with their specific issues. In some cases, like I don't live in downtown Hamilton. I can only imagine what it would be like dealing with it day by day. But people are reaching out about the drugs, or they're reaching out about the road conditions, or they're reaching out about their property tax bills, as if in some way I can help or fix them. And I can't, but they are all complicated issues. But the problem we get to when we discuss this is if you don't deal with them with a strategy that will work and the situation gets worse, you're now dealing with a situation that will be very hard. We could talk about the word tipping point, where how much resource could you throw at it? And can we afford to do that? And so I think we're dealing with years of poor policy in that one example. And again, I'm not running and I'm not the person, but there are people in the city of Hamilton in policy. And so they are accountable for the fact that it's getting worse, right? They would take full credit, wouldn't they? If Rob gets in and he seems he certainly seems like he has the turnaround skills in his pedigree and is obviously a very accounting driven person. So he might fit the norm of kind of what you think might be a really good leader at this time. But the truth is he's going to inherit, if he, manages to win, an even bigger problem that would have been 2 years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
And bigger problem than 2 years earlier. So how do you deal with it now? And we're not shy to cast light on San Francisco and look at how San Francisco's gone down the toilet, or look at California. It's like, you don't need to look that far, drive downtown. And it's not upon us as the ratepayers to stop robberies. It's not upon us as the taxpayers to solve the homelessness issue. It will take very thought out policy and then execution to make a difference. And I think now that turnaround will take a lot longer than building new units and construction. But people may not build as many units and as much construction until that problem's fixed, if you know what I mean. It's kind of like a catch-22.
Oh, absolutely.
Would you come here from Toronto or Malaysia and say, I'm going to have the confidence to put up a condo if you came for your site visit and witnessed what we're seeing? You might say, oh, my goodness, is there a part of Hamilton that's better? It would affect your decision whether or not to build here.
Oh, it does. Last year, 2025, Leona had their project on 75 James Street South. And the Mancinelli family made a public post where the Baptist Church on James Street, where they see busloads of homeless people being dropped off right in front of their project. What happens? It affects their condo sales. Now condo sales, they have to price it 100,000 less just to get some pre-sales. As you know, the developers are struggling to get even 65% of pre-sales in order to get financing. You got Rebecca condos. They have to, provide all these incentives to get some more pre-sales. But that's exactly what's happening in Hamilton.
It's so sad And finger pointing isn't going to fix it. And what I said last year when I was speaking to the mayor, because she wasn't shy to say it's partly because of the federal and the provincial policies, and they just dump them on Hamilton and blah blah blah. My answer to all of them, and not just the mayor, the elected officials, was that's your job. If your job is to turn around and say, I need money for my wastewater treatment plant from the federal government, or we've all heard about Build Canada with these billions of dollars, you should be lobbying them the way I would if there was a tax incentive. So let's say there was a tax incentive for manufacturing now to upgrade my truss plant. I would say that and say, hey, there's something there. Let's go and aggressively pursue that. And let's beg and do whatever we have to get some of that so I can afford to put the new technology to stay bleeding edge. You have this Build Canada money, which has been, I'm told some of it is for the development charge relief. But if you need to go and scream because of the cost of your policing or the cost of your drug addiction issues or whatever you're doing, you need to scream and yell. How can I, as a taxpayer? I mean, the example I used is, we have two foundations, and I said, I don't know what more you want me to do. I asked one of them how much they personally donate per year, and you wouldn't know the answer to that. The sound of silence, crickets. So everybody expects it to be somebody else's problem. Well, you can't always say it's somebody else's problem when you're elected. You have to take ownership of it. And this is the part that I think as a society, we've let them get off the hook and just get reelected because their name is well known. And again, I'll come back that some of them are fantastic and deserve to get reelected.
Absolutely.
But it should be an educated decision by us, not just based on party politics or dogma. That is the reason why we are where we are. So as I'd say to people, well, how does that work? It's not working. So would you at least prepared to discuss possibly changing with the goal of maybe changing, but what we're doing is clearly failed.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, Peter. And of course, remember, viewers out there, Peter is not political at all.
No.
Okay? He's not
Zero.
running for politics. He's not going to be a politician. He simply cares about Hamilton, wants Hamilton to thrive. And Peter, you mentioned you've noticed that strong partisan voting blocks haven't worked well for Hamilton. What does that mean? And and of course, it have left Hamilton feeling divided. I believe, is that strong mayor powers you're talking about, or the left outvoting the right? Oh, and then
I don't like to use the word left and right because again, that's just a.
Oh yes,
I
okay.
your point, right?
The good ones and the not so good ones.
And people assume that I'm a right-wing business guy, but I have two foundations, so and I care about the city immensely, and I care about. But
let's put a disclaimer out there, Peter. Okay.
Yeah.
Daniel Chen and Peter Turkstra is non-partisan. We are not left-wing, right-wing, right? We are very neutral. Just for the viewers out there, okay? Before you comment.
We are.
Right?
We are. I want competence. By the way, I grew up in Montreal, and the Montreal Canadiens in the playoffs, and the Leafs aren't. And if you're going to win at anything in life, you have to have the most competent team versus competition. So first of all, I think that most cities don't realize that they're actually in competition with cities surrounding them for people and liquidity and so forth. But I think that there appear to be, from what I can tell, and time will tell as people come forward with the videos that we repost and their positions on where they post, and they become more critical and get us data. But there is a group that basically came in to the last election, and some of them were there before, that came up with their own set of priorities of council that were based on dogma, and you can look it up. It's on the website. Last year, when two councillors put forth a motion to review development charges, even before Carney's announcement, to see what they could do, they said, in keeping with the council's priorities. So I contacted one of them and said, well, what is this? And he said, oh, you can look it up. We have them. I'm going to paraphrase it, but they're basically not big on construction, but they want more inventory. And if you look at it, you can look it up online. And I realized that they actually almost stated their manifesto. right? Which has, by the way, transpired into new departments for climate, new departments for added value for vacant units, new departments to deal with the micro shelters, new. Well, it's actually spelled out. There are several of them that I'm told really don't understand that they could give money to an Italian or a Dutch builder and get a house put up for a fraction of the charge. But they go, no, that's arm's length. We need to control it. We need to be Robin
Wow.
Hood. And so they vote a bit as a pack. My wife, who's lovely, Karen, was a school board trustee for 8 years. And it was the same thing within the school board, that they wouldn't necessarily listen to the counselor or the trustee in that area like Dundas or that area like Flamborough.
Mhm.
They would sort of almost in a mean way decide, as if, and you
Wow.
say, well, if I had representation and Daniel, you were in, the mountain, I'm not saying you get an unlimited say, but if you had the choice, but you really understood your market better, then why would they feel the need to override you? So we have that dynamic happening, but we also have strong mayor powers. And I understand why Doug Ford probably put them in place, but I don't think we're seeing evidence of it being effective in Hamilton, because I think it is also, first of all, as an example, I have strong Turkstra powers. I could do whatever
Yes.
I want. I can go to my executive team and trample all over them every day. And how would that work for morale? And how would that work for their longevity? And how would that work for accountability? But I'm hearing that there's a divide within the councillors themselves. So
No.
if you have strong mayor powers, again, I have strong Turkster powers. I have a call with my team. We have board meetings, but I am very careful to use executive privilege to overrule. To thought that a mayor could use her powers to avoid discussion about a budget process or to pick numbers and to punt things to the next council, which is not how all
Yes.
the councillors feel, to me, that's not democratic.
Oh,
That's autocratic. And that's my concern
absolutely.
with it.
Oh, the one of the prime examples seen was at that Stony Creek parking lot. It's just still famous till today, where the people wanted it. It was well utilized. And the mayor used her strong mayor powers, and poor Councillor Matt Francis, he said this is very undemocratic. They wanted to turn
Eh,
it to affordable housing, and now it, really negatively impact that community or everyone in the community. Use
yeah,
that parking
and
lot. There's
and
no
if
more
those
parking.
and back to what you were asking, if those dogma-driven councillors who do tend to vote as a pack, um, get their way, then competent councillors may not run. Right. And this is
Wow.
very different than professional sports, where every sports team tries to get the next, wonderful player and to make their team stronger. So what's happened, I think, is that the balance shifted in this last council specifically versus the prior one, where those who believe in fiscal responsibility were shouted down is too strong a word, but were outvoted. And then the mayor was using strong mayor powers. Well, is that with the goal of saying, well, then don't run? And if I get a few more in, like with this that are dogma driven, we will again prove it. I mean, but what I don't understand is if you're really socially focused, which I am personally with our foundations, how can you not understand that charging higher property taxes and higher utilities are pretty much the most regressive thing that you could do to
Absolutely.
somebody who's socially disadvantaged? High rent, high property taxes, and high utilities are absolute killers. So if that was actually your
Absolutely.
mantra, I would be saying I need to control my budget so that I don't end up with 23% taxes, so that I have those extra $1,000 in the pockets of my constituents so they can go and buy groceries. And while they're doing this, groceries are crazy, gas is crazy, utilities are crazy, taxes are going up. So guess what's happening? An impoverished Hamilton. Well, an
Hmm.
impoverished Hamilton can't spend. If it
Yeah.
can't spend, fewer jobs. So what they say is their mantra is it's not, it doesn't make any sense with their
Yeah.
policy.
Yep. And just for the viewers out there, Peter, because most would construe your response as, okay, well, he's a business guy, established, etc. but it's also the everyday Hamiltonian, right? The everyday taxpayer, the everyday homeowner is also being affected. Even the everyday renters is being affected, right? The
Yes.
policies that are supposed to help the renters, created by quote unquote the not so good politicians, is in fact hurting the renters. And I can't believe, Peter, that you said there are these such groups out there that is against construction, that supports the vacant unit tax, and all of these things manifested. I know there's many groups out there. I'm not a politician, I'm a policy guy. But I can't believe that people, out there, supports these things, because overall it'll be very detrimental to the city overall, and we will not have economic prosperity here. It will not be good for Hamilton. But like you say, good governance. And there was a question behind there was a part 2 question, revolving around what does good non-partisan governance actually look like to you, Peter? Because I'll share this one story for you, Peter. August 2025, City of Hamilton received a Good Governance Award, meaning the great on accountability and transparency. However, beginning April, the same Ward 2 councillor candidate, Kelly Ucharek, for 18 months battling with the City of Hamilton, to have them reveal that they spent $2 million in damages to hotel where they housed homeless people during the COVID years. And so that's $2 million in damages they spent, right, to these hotels, in addition to $19 million they spent to housing these homeless people, which means they paid for rooms, right, even a whole empty floor to separate the patrons from actual the homeless people staying there. And after 2 appeals of provincially and requests from Freedom of Information, where I believe you have to pay for those documents, and finally, beginning April, it was revealed. And that is a total opposite of good governance, because it sort of is not really showing accountability and transparency. But that was, and Kelly Ucharek, end of this month, I will be interviewing her as well, so she can shed more light on that story. But what does good non-partisan governance actually look like to you? Because you're very big on fiscal accountability, transparency, and budget with Thrive Hamilton, Peter.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is that good governance is not doing at the senior level. Leadership is about being informed and having the processes in place to deal with the complexity of what's going on in your world. And it doesn't matter whether you're running one hospital, or you're the board of the hospital, or you're running a Turkstra Lumber, or you're running a public company. Governance, or good governance, is having that your fingers on the pulse and enough of a process that you can arrive at solutions. And also, it's linked to transparency. People who are now dealing with Thrive realize that I phoned them back. At Turkstra Lumber, as an example, if somebody, we're very touch wood, have some, we don't get very many disputes because our folks are awesome. But every now and then, somebody can't pay their bill or whatever. And that needs to go through a process with a culture of solving problems and getting back to people effectively versus bottlenecks to getting through. And then there are certain issues that are big enough. The vast majority are handled by our team. Then some of them would make it to the executive level, who would make an informed decision and brief me. And then some of them, like for instance, what were we going to do during COVID, required my abject involvement in the decision-making process. Right. But as I mentioned, in that world, I was still part of the team versus saying, I'm Elon Musk and do this. So governance is linked to transparency. And I think at the end of the day, it's something you don't notice when it's going well. When it's going well, it looks independent. When it's going well, people say Turkstra Lumber does a good job, or Home Depot does a good job, or whoever is doing well in their business. When it stops working, they tend to say, well, why isn't it working? Well, it's very hard for a company or a culture or a municipality to consistently deliver wonderfully for their customers, their ratepayers, if they don't have governance and transparency. And it's clear that there's a bit of a yin and a yang with staff. But part of it is, what do you tell them? If you tell them, I want a report on the infrastructure costs to fix all of Hamilton, and they come back and say 9.8 billion, did you say to them, and if you were to prioritize the first 100 million, where would you spend it? Or did you give them instructions that in a way would come back and amplify the number for whatever purposes you have personally? That's why Thrive is using the word data-driven. If we've hired 955 people, if that's true, that's fact. But we should be able to know, where were they hired, why were they hired, and in those areas where they considered it an investment, like I'll use the example of the added value, the vacant unit tax, did the cost benefit work? Nobody's been able to tell me yet whether we hiring 16 people or whatever I heard, which probably has a few people on the sunshine list, actually raised more money. Was it actually a good investment, or should it be, well, that was something we tried and it failed? And this is something, they're all interconnected. But I hope I answered your question. I'm rambling,
yes.
but it's important that leadership understand the issues and acknowledge them.
Peter, I think there is no cost benefit analysis with these decisions of hiring by the city and rolling out these programs. I don't know, but also the what was it, the adequate temperature bylaw, okay? Because sometimes I sit in these committee meetings. Council, councilor will direct staff to go and report report back on why we should have an adequate temperature bylaw, right? That's a maximum temperature bylaw, 26 degrees, okay? We know climate change, heating, and etc., okay? And for the viewers out there, I'm just saying what providing some insights, okay? I'm very neutral, very non-partisan. But then staff, now that's their objective, and they go out and they have meetings with different stakeholders. They gather a bunch of different information, so what's happening in other municipalities, and then derive at a conclusion. There is no good reason to have this bylaw, but they were directed by by the council, city council, or a councillor to go and find reasons why we should recommend it. So they're in a very tough position. Some of these in staff, they're very tough position. And sometimes, yes, they do butt heads with, the councillors. But again, it's a job for them as well, right? So they don't want to lose that job. So Peter, Hamilton has great location, institutions, and hardworking people. You chose the name Thrive Hamilton, which is self-explanatory, on purpose because you see huge potential here, and it's evidence. Despite everything, paint a clear picture for us. What would a fiscally responsible Hamilton actually look like in 5 or 10 years? I see a bright future. Well, maybe because, today is a sunny day, but it really does have a lot of potential. I mean, the Niagara Escarpment, the waters, we have everything, the waterfalls, we have everything, the resources here for good business.
We certainly we do. So we come back again to the fiscal responsibility. If we were fiscally responsible and we looked at whatever the budget is, 3 billion or whatever it is, and reallocated that to the areas that really needed to be spent, as opposed to some of these wasteful projects, we tend to react like, we spent $10 million. It's a drop in the bucket. But the truth is that's $10 million that could have been used somewhere else. And these are all these hidden things when you have a culture and an organization like we do now. So I think if you controlled the budget, you'd have more resources to spend on the areas of need versus just saying we are an employment agency and let's go hire another 500 people, because that's, of course, the negative side of it. But we also if you look at our culture, and my father was involved in insight and the way we were spreading with the arts and the music and the vibrant festivals and the, closing streets for a day to just pack the place and bringing in youth and energy and positivity and foodies. And now you add on top of that the Live Nation facility, and you look at downtown, some of the work around Theater Aquarius, some of those beautiful Empire Times
Yes,
buildings and the ones there. Those were done by entrepreneurs who had faith in a better tomorrow. So I think
absolutely.
if a new council comes in and quickly demonstrates that they are going to get a handle on the issues financially, but also to use those resources to tackle some of the other ones, you could see that kick back in. Capital is always sitting just on the side. Just as important, by the way, will be to change the culture of bureaucracy, because even if you thought you could build an apartment and it could be financially viable because your taxes are now under control or whatever the reason being, if it's a 2-year process and delays and their culture is to find the one missing comma and send it back to you saying start over again, or we have new rules on water, or we have new rules on whatever, or we have a climate department, uh, and it bounces around this bureaucracy. What became clear in speaking to every form of developer and renovator is that the problem wasn't just fiscal in the sense of the development charge size. It was that even if you could pay for that development charge, the return and turnaround from the city staff and Hamilton and the bureaucracy based on the rules was horrifying. And certainly the provincial level has tried to address some of those, and I give them credit for it. But it's still really easy to say, oh, you missed this one comma. Let's start over again at 21 days. And we see it, and I have it in a trust plant. And I went to my trust plant manager, and I hope we don't get blacklisted. And I said, is it true that we would be considered the most difficult municipality? And unfortunately, his answer, and he's a very lovely person, I had to ask him twice, was that yes, partly because we have people in those jobs that don't really understand construction. And we're not the ones submitting the engineering for the floors and the roofs and everything. It's typically a builder putting them in using our engineering behind the facts. So it's not like they're returning it back to us. But whether it's somebody, building a not-for-profit, or somebody building an apartment, or somebody flipping a house, or somebody trying to build a house, there's that turnaround time. And they behave as if time isn't money. Well, if you bought an apartment 2 years ago with the hope of turning it into housing, much needed housing downtown, which would result in over time in lower apartment monthly rates, and here you are 3 years later with bottlenecks, that ends up being in the price of the rent. And I just don't think I say they don't get it. It's like I'm speaking to somebody who doesn't believe that part of their role is to help their customers. And I feel for some of the staff, because some of them are great. They must sit there and say, oh my goodness, I want this to go. And I'd love to work, give you, yes, Daniel, on your project, but no. And I see it. We have 3,500 active accounts at Turkstra, and we have people who can't pay their bills because they get into this getting stuck on a project that's stuck with bureaucracy. And that's not just true of Hamilton, by the way. That's true of a lot of the municipalities. But it needs to be dealt with, that culture, as much as the financial side.
Oh, no, absolutely, Peter. Now, Thrive Hamilton is all about facts, transparency, and accountability, not endorsements or partisanship. What's your direct call to action for all listeners who agree it's time to turn the corner?
Well, don't be like I was 4 years ago. Get educated. Read the paper. Probably no different than we tell our try and tell our kids, which is read the paper, get informed, and vote. Right? I mean, I was raised that it didn't matter who I voted for as long as I voted. That was like, it's a privilege to be Canadian, best country in the world, by the way, and have this ability to make a difference. It's wasted if you don't vote. But if when you're voting, I think we have a responsibility to get more educated on people's platforms and policies. And I think we have a duty to the next generation to hold the people that we elect accountable. And if they don't perform, then they should expect to lose their job. It's just It's just that fair. So that would be my wish, is just that people see this as a platform to read. And that's why I'm not reposting smile cookie videos. I'm going to be reposting videos where candidates speak about the challenges ahead and what their solutions are to those challenges. And as I mentioned, I've opened it up to all candidates. So, but some of them, as I mentioned, are pretty quiet. And I think I know the reason why. But perhaps we will drag them into accountability by starting to ask questions. And we're not at the stage yet of asking them the questions. We're growing the base now, but as we get closer to election time, we will be asking more directed questions to the councillors.
And Peter, would you also be, is it people, anyone send you either some article that they came across on these forums, etc., and then send it to you, and then you post or you repost? How does it work for all viewers out there? Because your platform is very facts-based, holding these councillors and the mayor accountable in their positions as rightfully they should be held accountable. Do people just send you anything, or how does it work?
So in the context, so our webpage itself is basically a placeholder which explains, who are we and why are we upset? That's what it is.
Yeah.
And then the real forum is going to be on Instagram and Facebook. And so people can engage many ways. They can, first of all, they can go and subscribe or like or follow Thrive Hamilton on Instagram as an example. And they can private message me if they want, or they can write to admin@thrivehamilton.ca. And I've had some people do that. When the politicians are following me now and I see their content, so the example I used was I didn't republish Smile Cookie content, but when I see them and they start to follow me, I see what they're posting. And if I believe it's relevant, I can amplify it. If anybody out there sees a really good article, they can send it by way of email or private message. But part of the challenge is because of the ruling with republishing news, if it's basically just content or fact-based or something from LinkedIn, I may be able to publish it easily. As you may know, if you want to just repost that on Instagram or on Facebook, you either have to make me a collaborator, I'm getting too technical now, or I can take a screenshot and then put the link. So, but I'm very open to that kind of feedback. But I hope that they would be the ones coming out with the argument. I'm doing a few videos now to kind of explain who am I and why am I upset and what are the issues. But over time, I hope you see less of me and you hear more from the mayoral candidates. And you hear more from the people that are elected officials explaining their track record and explaining what will be different next time, and from the people that are running explaining them. Because let's face it, there are going to be some people running that are nut bars.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I'm just thinking.
I am the moderator.
Yes. I was just thinking, Peter, as you were talking, I don't know if anyone has ever done this, what you're doing, and to hold these, candidates or councillors, etc., in, accountable, because then they can simply just get away with anything, and people wouldn't know if they don't. They don't know unless they visit your platform, Thrive Hamilton. And so we're gonna in the last segment, rapid fire questions. Okay, these are great for short videos and they get a lot of views. Okay.
Okay.
So
I'm ready.
You're ready. Okay. So
I probably offended just about everybody. So.
well, it is supposed to be nuanced and just a natural, free-flowing conversation, but of course it can, could be edited if you would like. You've pointed out that while most Hamiltonians are back at work full-time, many city staff are still only in the office 1 or 2 days a week. You've heard stories of people dropping off plans and being told to come back next Wednesday. How is this affecting day-to-day services and taxpayers?
Well, we're keenly aware of it because the process of building a home or doing a renovation or building an apartment requires far more back and forth, even in a normal world, than most other processes. So, and that's why I'm very careful to say picking up my recycling or my garbage has nothing to do with that aspect of it. I'd say that it's ridiculous that they've somehow HR has convinced them that 1 or 2 days a week, that more than that would be a hardship and we might lose people. To which I'd say, well, then good, let some of them leave and that'll help control your budget, because it just doesn't make any sense. We're all back to work. The ramifications of that 1 to 2 days, I think it was 1 day, it might be 1 day now and 2 days the following week, are obviously efficiency doesn't get better. It just doesn't. All those people who could be supporting downtown Hamilton, and this was like Ottawa during COVID, are not going and supporting their local restaurants and businesses or the rest. I don't personally believe it's good for culture or morale to be separated, which is why so many businesses are calling their employees back to work. And it might be part of the explanation as to why we needed 1,000 more employees and have less service than before we had 1,000. And how could you add 1,000 employees and us not be anything but Disney World happy? We should be cleaning gum off the streets. And so, but that's just an obvious lob ball. They just don't have the courage to make that decision, which in the minds of most Hamiltonians, it would be obvious. But most people don't go to City Hall ever to do a building permit. So there are obviously many who might be oblivious, who may not even know that that city in those professional positions don't come to the office more often. They just don't know. But trust me, it isn't good on any sense.
Not good for efficiency as well. And since launching Thrive Hamilton, you received a flood of messages from frustrated Hamiltonians. What are some of the most common concerns people are bringing to you, Peter?
It's been a bit of a surprise, because I thought that people would be focusing on the 23% property tax increase. And then and most of them don't know about the other 10, 15% that's buried. And that should be their I thought that would probably be their number one concern. And for sure, there's a large group of people, especially those of us in business, where it's crippling. I would say that the crime and the drug usage for those downtown has really shone through. Like, they are looking for any avenue to try and see if we can effectuate change in that regard. So I'm actually surprised that was, kind of shows that we have a heart, right? It shows that at the end of the day, money matters, but at the same time, we want a very successful, business. So, and the lack of trust, I'd say that the lack of trust for those who have contacted me and you mentioned some of them that have gone and had delegations and have asked for freedom of information, their lack of trust is kind of in keeping with the same feeling I had trying to get answers the last year. So those are the two. That and the crime thing, I wasn't really as aware as to how poor the situation was. But then in the last 2 weeks now, we're reading in The Spectator, we're now getting shootings. And this is not something that I remember 12 years ago. So there's another dynamic there. We've unfortunately now got that big city disease that we used to think existed in Toronto has now kind of moved our way, which is going to stretch our resources even more.
And there's also another article, Peter, where politicians are also getting attacked. So say, for instance, there was an article, I think, in Bay Observer with the Ward 3 Councillor Narinda Nand, increased her security because she's getting death threats where people are saying, I'm not, this podcast is supposed to also be viewed by children too. But, all these, like not so good things that makes Narinda Nand more fearful of her life, and people following her home to throw a Molotov cocktail. I didn't even know what is a Molotov cocktail, right? I Googled it. It's an incendiary device, right? Inflammatory, thrown through the window. I've never, maybe these things happen in America, Peter, but in Canada, to see violence in politics and youth violence, oh my goodness. It's a different
and Thrive
kind
and my commitment to those who participate in Thrive, because of course there'll be a place where I can post videos and people can respond, whether they're for or against it, and then people can respond on top of that. It's really a fully democratic process, is to keep the peace. Violence should never be condoned. period. Maybe on the hockey ice, but this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But I think it's
Yes.
an indication of the sense of hopelessness. And I'm hoping that by being fully transparent and posting this information forward, that people will say, well, the right solution is to vote differently next time. In the past, in my cottage area, I went to the ombudsman because I wasn't happy with the way that municipality was being run. Nothing like Thrive, and the ombudsman said, sorry to tell you, Peter, but municipalities are considered to be mature organizations. And so even if you don't like it, what they enact really doesn't have any way of counteracting it. So if they had just said it's 14%, there'd be no way of us fighting that. They're considered mature organizations. So they told me, and it's still true today, your answer is to vote next time at the ballot box. And that's always stuck with me, that the people that are in there were voted in by somebody. So we're partly complicit for the solution we get. If that's who you voted for, well, this is what we have. And if you choose not to hold them accountable, well, then you should probably expect more of the same.
That's why platforms like this, Peter, that are not where people get information that is not reported in traditional media. Thrive Hamilton, right? Where what's not Thrive Together, Peter. It's the top of your website. It says, maybe I
I
can
don't
get
even
it.
know.
I
I wrote it.
forgot.
I'm sure I wrote
Yeah.
it. We deserve to thrive, or
Yeah.
yeah.
So
I could
and
bring it up if
then
you want.
and the Chin podcast is all about advancing economic prosperity. But certainly, Peter, going back, I never remembered Canada to be like this when I first came, probably over 2 decades ago. Canadians were nice, friendly, it was safe. You can go outside and walk the street safely. Not like what we see in downtown Hamilton here. And it's not good as what Rob Cooper said. Now, the next question, Peter, and you can give one example or many examples, okay, of wasteful spending you've seen coming out of Hamilton City Hall. I know you have many, just one or two big ones.
Well, I would say the vacant unit tax is a disaster. And
Correct.
to hear that little old ladies didn't understand the paperwork, so didn't know to send it back, but when they got their Hamilton bill, just paid it because what you do when you get a bill from Hamilton, it must be, they have the power. That is just so wrong on multiple levels and clearly not thought through. And the fact that we haven't had any real accountability as to the cost benefit of it is staggering to me. I would say that the hiring very senior people for the climate department is concerning, given that that's often controlled by the provincial government, and trying to change building codes just to be like Hamilton special didn't work. The micro shelter one is a disaster. Of note, by the way, I see the mayor's issues with her home as an example of not being in the right mind space when you're a leader and dealing with the way she does. But to me, that's nothing compared to these other decisions. That's just a personal small battle, but that doesn't compare to the wastefulness of these other decisions. And and I'm sure I could keep going. And they're the things that I think, or these are the topics that will come out of Thrive as people run on them and bring more data to the discussion.
Absolutely. And one city fee, charge, or regulation you would repeal or freeze immediately to help small businesses, builders, and local jobs.
Well, I've already discussed the development charges, so that's a separate topic. But I was horrified to learn about this water tax, the one that was voted in quietly, quickly, without ample dialogue, which would result in massive taxes to people like myself, and I'll explain in a minute. And do you want to interject and explain what it
Could
is?
you explain the water tax for the viewers? Is that the rain tax, or is it the same? Or water
It's the
tax is
rain tax.
different? Oh, okay,
It's
yep.
the rain tax. And if you
If you
want to
can
know what it would
explain it,
cost
yep.
you, yeah, if you would want to know what it costs you, there's actually now a calculator on the Hamilton website where you can go and say, I live at this address and what are my taxes going to be? So as an example, in my home, it came up and it said, your estimated tax will be $200. But it was voted in 2025 with not all councillors present. And then and then they realized very quickly, because they hadn't put in the work, kind of like going to war without doing your homework, that it was going to cripple businesses and cripple farmers because they made it on something that staff gave them. And then they came back and said that they're going to subsidize the farmers because we can't be kicking farmers anymore. But because it was a zero-sum game, that drove up the cost to all the industrial properties. So as an example, I put in the 4 locations at, actually I have 5 parcels of land technically, excluding my house, and it would be $35,000 of additional taxes.
Wow.
That could destroy a company. By the way, if I
Yes.
was to go down Arbon Avenue, and heaven forbid all these bad businesses that employ people and buildings, I started to type in my neighbors and it came up 16,000, 42,000. It's looked up at one of my steel customers, 56,000. Now it was deferred until next year. So if the counselors get in place, they could immediately kill it. But I can assure you that this is an insidious tax that they didn't think through. It sounds like they realized they were going to crush farmers, so they've given them some support, which means it's higher for the rest of us. I haven't seen any cost benefit. They hide behind equitable and say, I'm not paying my fair share. But my goodness, I've been here since 1953. Turkstra Lumber was founded in Hamilton, and I can't afford $35,000 of additional tax for, by the way, nothing. And I didn't know about this. I don't know if you knew about it fully, but did you know that there's a calculator where you can type in your address? So now
I
I'm
didn't
reaching out to friends and they're horrified.
I didn't know there was a calculator, but if the water tax is the same as the rain tax, what I do
Yeah,
know, there was a lot of backlash with the farmers because why are they getting taxed? Because they are not connected to the municipal sewers, right? Like in the urban, right? They are more rural areas. And then the second thing is, I believe the tax, that rain tax was deferred to next year to revisit.
correct. And that was done by way of vote, led by 1 or 2 counselors that I would put in the fiscal side, people who care. And there were, I believe, 5 or 6 that voted to keep it. So we could have been living in a reality right now of that already being my reality because it wasn't up for discussion. It was actually passed and now it's deferred. So in the same way we talk about the carbon tax, and Carney came in and said, okay, this is not popular, it's not effective, and I'm going to kill that carbon tax. We need for the next council to run on making sure it doesn't happen. And I can assure you, if you start to take in some of the larger property owners, for fun, I typed in the Amazon, just the Amazon building. And as you know, Amazon has as soon as Amazon builds, a lot of other buildings build next to them. Heaven forbid they hire people and create employment and create prosperity and create
Yes.
people going through Tim Hortons and all that stuff. And I typed in that, and I think it was $142,000. Now, I don't think Amazon's going to move, but I could go broke. And so,
Absolutely.
and there's a logic that they have, and they spent all this money to come out with it under direction of certain counselors. They managed to sneak it through. And when it was deferred, 5 or 6 of the counselors voted that they wanted to stick with the plan, even though they knew they'd be sticking it to businesses, which has a direct result in employment. And unless you're not paying attention, employment has a direct link to viability and poverty. So
Yep.
it's nuts.
And Peter, I'll put this out there because for the viewers who simply think business people, oh, 35,000, how can that cripple their business? You got the money, etc. It's some businesses like restaurants, they operate very lean. If they don't have customers walking through that door, they're going to go bust. If food is not being turned over monthly, it spoils and it goes to waste, right? And if they're not making profit or they can't even sustain, then they close down, which is what we're seeing in Hamilton. We got many nice restaurants, long-time family restaurants, closed down in Hamilton, and we have seen it. And for the viewers out there, that's what an additional cost can result in business closures.
And if I look at, as you, the example of Turkstra Lumber, last year was our most challenging year in our history with the collapse of the kind of townhouse and singles. And this year we are clearly a few $1 million in the red year to date. So before somebody says, oh, those business people, I have a responsibility to our employees. And during COVID, they gave everything they had. And so last year we didn't have a wholesale layoff. And this year I've committed to not having a wholesale layoff. But my staff have agreed to take advantage of work share. Some of them are laid off temporarily. We're hoping for better tomorrow. Then we got a kick in the teeth of a real winter. I can assure you that $35,000, well, it's a lot of money. Does it make sense to you that companies can just absorb that in a time of crisis? I mean, we're basically in a recession now, and they want to add to taxes with impunity. Well, that's when I say to them, clearly you don't care about me. And they go, no, I care about you. Oh, Peter, we care immensely. And can I come for a smile cookie photo shoot? And I was like, no, I don't want a smile cookie photo shoot. I need for you to engage in effective policy and do you understand that if you keep my costs low, do you understand that's part of your job? Your job and my job with all of my 3,500 customers and our retail customers is to be competitive. If I couldn't be competitive with the box stores, we have a full online e-commerce webpage now, which is delicious, by the way. I love it. But we have to be competitive. And they just have managed to, through Dogma, say, oh, that's just something that doesn't apply to us. But then they cripple us at the same time. So they're actually quietly vicious. They pretend that they're nice, but they're actually out there to damage us. And that is something I don't say lightly. They're out there to damage us. And I can't understand why.
No, you're absolutely right, because you look at the policies, you read the comments in these news articles, it's exactly, what these, the people out there in Hamilton, what they are seeing. And not just coming from yourself, Peter, other people in Hampton seeing the same thing. So the next question, Peter, what's one simple thing City Hall could do tomorrow that would actually make Hamilton more affordable for ordinary families? Because many are feeling the pinch right now. What's one thing City Hall can do to help these families?
I'm not sure they can do anything between now and election time. The development charge side, which would help for housing to be more affordable, will take some time to go and lobby the federal government for that money. They have proven that they're not prepared to make the sacrifices on the budget. And so I don't see any reasonable discussion that could be had until the next council. So yes. I think we're kind of stuck with what we have. The real discussion is if the 3.8% was fugazi, was just picked out of the air, then the real benefit will be in stopping next year's rate increases. And if that can, instead of it being 10%, if somebody can see the way to making that 0 or 1 or 2%, that would make a big difference in the income in the pockets of the hardworking people of Hamilton. But I think it's too late now for this year. It's already fixed, but we need people that will come in and will commit to that platform. And I do think we need to give them a few months to get their feet wet. But that's why I'm saying if they come in and they commit to it as a philosophy versus their dogma-driven priorities of council, it can't be all about bike lanes. It just can't. It can't dominate it. It needs to be about the issues that you've discussed and affordability. And they're the ones who've increased the taxes. Again, you can't look at me. I've paid my property taxes every year. I've provided employment. I have 2 foundations. How can I be the reason that it went up 23%? Well, maybe it did because they're not attracting enough investment. There isn't enough growth. There weren't enough houses built. There wasn't enough employment. They weren't benefiting from a thriving economy. So I do think, unfortunately, I have to tell it the way it is, the truth. I think we're stuck with what we have until we get new leaders.
No, the truth. A lot of people could resonate with that same truth, Peter, out there. And, so essentially what Peter Turkstra is saying, the only way to have change, positive change for the future, is your vote. All the viewers and Hamiltonians out there, it's your vote this October 2026 Hamilton Municipal election. As a third generation Hamiltonian, Peter, you lived there since 1966, okay? This is a lighter question, not a heavy one. What's your
Fine.
favorite neighborhood or hidden gem in the city? Okay, you know Hamilton probably better than me. I only visited maybe Webster, Waterfall, Albion Waterfall. But what's your favorite neighborhood? You could probably say where you currently live, or just any hidden gems and why.
So, first of all, I've lived here since 1996, and I was lucky enough to grow up in Montreal, which is a fabulous city. And I've lived in other fabulous cities around the world. So when I came to join the family business, we settled in Greensville, and you mentioned Webster's Falls, very close to Webster's Falls. So the Bruce Trail, which I hiked along with Fred Lozani and Mark McLennan and a fellow who came from Finland in 30 days, is an absolute gift. So, and guess what? Hamilton almost owns a big chunk of it. So from coming from the Niagara area and coming through and seeing all of these waterfalls, and we had thousands of kids watching our trek because doing it in 30 days was actually hard. We actually climbed Mount Everest 7 times in altitude in that 30 days. It was
Wow.
a tough challenge. And we had schools and they'd bring all these kids that would meet us at the trailheads, whole schools. Catholic School Board built it into their curriculum. And these kids had no idea they had the Bruce Trail. And some of them had no idea they were next to Lake Ontario. You know, the inner city kids downtown, they didn't travel very far. So to me, that's an incredible gift that we have geographically, which has been there and is there. And the Bruce Trail is something that's absolutely available to everybody. It's free of charge. And it's an incredible resource. So I would have to say that. In terms of my favorite neighborhood, I've only lived in Greensville and now I live in Ancaster. I will say that in Ancaster, which by the way seems to be a little bit more not in my backyard focused, not sure why, but they seem to resist everything, that the dogs are less friendly. So without getting in trouble with all my Ancaster friends, in Greensville, it's a little bit more bohemian and the downtown is really kind of food centric. And in Ancaster, the people are fabulous, but I'm more likely to run into somebody who's a little bit crabby and wants to take issues with everything. Just a little bit more political. But don't send me hate mail. I love both.
Yes. No, Peter is a nice guy for the viewers out there, okay? He cares about Hamilton and he wants Hamilton to thrive. What keeps you up at night about the direction Hamilton is heading?
What keeps me up at night is the success of Turkstra Lumber and the employees who work for me. So many don't know the pressures that it takes to run a public company or a family company, or for that matter, a small location on Locke Street. We all share that same burden of wanting to provide for our employees and for our families. And so these folks have been snuffing out our opportunity and could absolutely kill Turkstra Lumber. And at 75 years, I'm the third generation, I call it custodian, because my name's on the building, but it's my staff who do all the slugging and all the hard work, and I love them with every ounce of my being, and I want them to survive. I won't use cliches like thrive, but I want them to know that I am doing my very best to provide for them. But there's only so much I can do. I can't solve problems like the gas prices right now. I can't solve some of them. But that is what keeps me awake, is this notion that some of them, if the situation doesn't improve, will not have employment at Turkstra. I feel the responsibility to grow. Now, I may be able to do it by attrition, but that's counter to what entrepreneurs do. So, no, it's a very, very real concern. If you came to me with another $35,000 hidden tax, and by the way, these taxes never go down, right? And then you add on top of that my employees can't live affordably, and you add to that the mismanagement continues. It's still, and I say to this day, it's the biggest threat to my business. It's not box stores. It's not great competitors, because great competitors make us better. It's actually our own municipal leaders. And I don't say that with any pleasure. That is the saddest statement I can make.
Very well said, Peter. And if you can give every voter one piece of advice before the October 26, 2026 municipal election, what would it be?
Would it be wrong to say watch Thrive period Hamilton at Instagram? But just not just us. I think that there are many people. You mentioned the Bay Observer, the Spectator will have some coverage. The counselors themselves will have their own web pages. But when
Yes.
you go to a lot of them, or a lot of them are very general, I think my advice would be to reach out. They're well within their rights to reach out to a counselor if they have a top two, let's say an incumbent and somebody they don't know. They should be writing them saying, what is your position on the water tax? What is your position on having a fixed cap? I think some of them may come out. I think we have to hold them accountable by asking questions. Don't expect them, those who are incumbents that are seeking for reelection, to come out and volunteer this data. It'll probably come from people running against them that'll put in the work and go through the confidentiality process of the rest to bring the data to light. But I think if people start to read all these multiple sources, and I hope that Thrive Hamilton would be part of them, then they'll be the ones to determine who's the best next mayor.
Nope.
And to me, that's democracy. That is the definition of democracy.
And one thing I'll add, Peter, most people, they don't know when these council meetings take place, like in advance, so they can submit their thoughts and questions. No one really tracks when, and sometimes the agenda is released days or probably the day before the council meeting, or like these committee meetings, and etc. So that one feedback for some of the Hamiltonians, because they only read about it the next day in the news, and then that's how they learn about it. Oh, when did this happen? Oh, when was the vacant unit tax passed? They didn't know in advance. So one feedback.
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with contacting a counselor and say you'd like to have a coffee. So one of the barriers to democracy is that the process of going with a delegation is daunting to most people. For some people, the process of putting their hand up is intimidating. But if you have candidates that are running and they expect your vote, they might come knocking at your door. There's nothing wrong with you telling them what your prime concerns are and getting their position on where it stands. And it's possible, just like at the federal level, where we had, a real focus on consumer carbon tax, but a new candidate came in with the same party and said, I want to kill that tax, that some of the people who were in favor of things like the water tax might change their tune, right? Because at the end of the day, politicians are first and foremost, and I'm learning this because I'm not one, they want to get reelected. So if they ran on a platform,
There you go.
even if they voted
That's
for
an
it,
international statement. All politicians just want to get reelected. And for the viewers, Peter and I are not politicians. We are non-partisan. We are very neutral. Okay, for if you want to attack us on social media,
they'll tell you what you want to hear. But if they hear that they're not going to get in because of the vacant unit tax or because of the whatever other expenses or budget control, then that's a pressure point, and they may change their focus going into the future. So I would minimize that. They work for you. I don't know why we're so shy to say this is wrong. And it pains me that people are having break-ins and they feel like they don't have a voice. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, I can't fix any of those problems. I'm just a platform to get the word out.
But this will be the most interesting and most relevant election ever, Peter, because we have so many frustrated Hamiltonians out there. And you are getting a lot of responses on your platform. And so it's great that you brought forward and launched Thrive Hamilton. What gives you the most hope that Hamilton can truly thrive in the coming years?
Well, as somebody who grew up in Montreal, I understand the power of positive policy and negative policy. And in the same respect, Montreal has wonderful characteristics which make it a world-class city, but they went through division and policies and language issues and the rest. And I have witnessed, by the way, I have vendors, the Turkstra Lumber, that fell apart and get back on their feet and hire a new executive team and all of a sudden are world-class. I have watched turnarounds, and for us to give up hope and just say, this is the Hamilton way. We are what we are. We will vote the following way, strikes me as a self-fulfilling negative prophecy. So in the same way we would tell our kids it's a gift to vote, put in the time and vote properly. I have seen many incidences of turnarounds. And I think that the only opportunity the only focus we should have is the positive one. When I talk about choosing better candidates next time, you notice I don't pick any names and speak about specific failings of people. I'm talking about it as an eco-culture, as a culture that they have. And we can make that decision ourselves when we vote. And then if they get the right people in place, we'll have a different outcome. And I've seen it. It's palpable. By the way, one day the Leafs might find some defense and a goalie and win. It's possible, right? And you can get close. But if you get close and you don't get the Stanley Cup, you're still better off than being last, right? So
Absolutely.
progress, not perfection. But it starts, in our case, given the dilemma that we have, with the people that we put into power at the next election.
I love the optimism, Peter. And I was thinking about two questions because I heard this from the Ward 2 councillor candidate Andrew Selman when I interviewed him, and he mentioned in his ward only 30-something% of people in his ward actually go out and vote. I asked, why not more? And then I read an article where it said the last time they had in 2010, about 40% of people actually go out vote, right, in the ballots. Why isn't there much more? Is it just how it is historically? Why isn't there more than 50% or more than 80% of people in Hamilton vote?
I can't explain it.
Okay.
I don't know. I think that if you woke up and 4 years later you had 23% higher property tax, that in itself, even if you didn't go downtown and see what's happening, which is scary, but can be fixed, you would just scream. But there's this kind of I'm just going to take it philosophy, and I think a lot of people, because it's a drizzle over time, with a lot of propaganda saying this is the best it can be. We're being patted on the head and being told that we're doing a great job, we're doing a great job, we're doing a great job. And meanwhile, most of us don't go downtown every day. So I really can't explain it. I don't know what the maximum would be. And if Thrive is effective, one of the measures that I might have is whether or not we get record people voting. Because I don't think that's a function just of Thrive. That'll be a function of the Spectator, the Bay Observer, all these podcasts, getting people to understand the issues and the importance. Because otherwise, they're going to go to sleep. And by the way, I voted last time. I always vote, but I can't remember who I voted for. I just, and it wouldn't have been on party lines. I would have made a decision at that time, but I certainly didn't have a lot of accurate information. I certainly didn't expect this level of dogma out of our counselors. So, but most people are oblivious to that. And I get it. They don't, how did we make it their job? The city works for us. Every dollar that they play Robin Hood and hand out is money that came from my pocket or my employees' pockets or the businesses. So it's a dynamic socially that I can't understand, but we're just not willing to stand and fight for it.
And
yet.
Peter, also what I've learned is people who own property in Hamilton but does not live in Hamilton, they too are eligible to vote.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I've learned as well. So Peter, any final message to the average Hamiltonian who's feeling the tax squeeze or watching services decline, especially those who have never voted municipally before, because we want to get the ones who have never voted before to go out and vote. What's your final message to them?
It'll be a repetition. Get informed. Hold your elected officials accountable. Contact them and ask them to have a coffee. Get together on your street and say, hey, this is affecting us, and get together as a group if you can. Get your argument through. Get it so somehow the elected officials, whether they're sitting or running, understand your priorities. Hold everybody accountable, preferably in writing if we can. Look up the voting track record, like I said, of that water tax and say, well, why did somebody continue to want to put that in versus other ones. Do the homework. I'm sad that we have to do it, but do the homework because it matters. And if you don't, I'll flip it around and you wake up with another 25% in the next 4 years, then what happens to your actual affordability? If you're retired and you're on a single income, and as you know, we don't get a lot of money in your senior years, is this going to drive people out of their homes? It is at a crisis point. And so I would just make the point that as unfortunate as it is, your vote has always mattered, but it's never mattered more. So please put in the work, hold them accountable, and then vote for who you think is the best candidate.
And for all the Hamiltonians out there, if you don't know the email address of your ward councillor, simply type it in Grok or ChatGPT and ask what's the email address so you can direct those questions. So Peter, where should people go right now to follow Thrive Hamilton for the unfiltered, facts-based updates ahead of the election?
As I mentioned, we have a very simple website with a placeholder that explains who are we and why are we upset, and has some of the facts at the transparency, advocacy, and so forth. And then if you can go to that, that's at Thrive Hamilton, all one word, .ca. From there, or you can go directly to Instagram and Facebook. On Instagram, it's Thrive Hamilton. And on Facebook, it's Thrive Hamilton. Gotta love all this stuff. And if you can subscribe to those or follow them, that's all you need to do. Right now, as I mentioned, a lot of it are videos explaining who we are and why we're upset in some of these really high level issues. But as we move forward, we will start to post questions, firm questions of them, as you asked of us, and ask them to be accountable. And I think several things will happen. Some people will just refuse to answer, which will be telling in itself, and others will come forward and participate heavily. And I can't control which way that goes, but you will have a voice. And if you follow on Facebook or Instagram and the candidates come forward with their policies or answers to questions, if you agree or disagree, you will be able to comment on them and be part of the discussion.
Thank you, Peter. I think this was one of my best interviews. I very much enjoyed the conversation, and you tell the truth, Peter. I love when you just simply tell the truth like it is, exactly what's happening in Hamilton. So all Hamiltonians who don't know these things, now they know after they watched this episode, and very much appreciate your time. I'm not sure if this was the longest interview that you did. Was it?
It's pretty long. Maybe you can slice it into pieces or something.
Yes.
And I'm also getting bored. I'm also, because I'm getting bored with myself. I wish I could hand this off. The real fun will be when others participate and basically being the moderator of the discussion to make sure it stays civil. But I really enjoyed our discussion. I think that the part of the issue will be, how do you get the word out that this platform exists? And that is a short-term challenge, but it's growing every day. So I really appreciate the time that you've put into asking me the questions. And all we can do is hope for a better tomorrow. I mean, to put our head in the sand and just say it's just the way Hamilton is, flies in the face of how all of us as proud Hamiltonians should feel. There's always a better tomorrow, but it starts with decision making. So I thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, Peter, and stay on for another 2 minutes. Thank you.
All right, cheers. Thank you.
Peter, I want to sincerely thank you for spending nearly 2.5 hours with me today. Your honesty, your clear business perspective as a longtime Hamilton employer, and your deep care for this city came through so powerfully in every answer. From the 23% property tax increases and the use of reserves, to staff growth with declining services, transparency issues, development charges, wasteful spending, and the urgent need for better fiscal accountability, this has been one of the most important and timely conversations I've had on the show. To all our listeners and viewers in Hamilton and across Ontario, if you care about where your tax dollars are going, if you want real transparency and accountability at City Hall, and if you want to see Hamilton thrive for the next generation, I strongly encourage you to follow Thrive Hamilton. Visit thrivehamilton.ca and follow at thrive.hamilton on Instagram and Facebook. And most importantly, whether you've voted municipally before or not, mark your calendar for October 26, 2026. Your vote in this upcoming municipal election truly matters more than ever. Peter, thank you for joining me. This has been the Gen Podcast.